Welcome to the Success Pick and Mix podcast. I'm your host, Nicky Raby, a professional pick and mixer. I'm a personal brand coach, a speaker, an actor, a creator, and a podcaster. I'm on a mission to help you find and create your version of success. Your pick and mix of life and business on your terms. A blend that complements your personality, your goals, and your circumstances. Since 2018, I've been sharing interviews and mini episodes to help you unlock your next step, to make it real and make it happen. Round here, we dream big. We go for the ideal version. We talk about money and make moves our future selves would be proud of. This podcast is free and available for you whenever you need it. So do rate, review, and subscribe for new episodes. If you want to go deeper with my support, check out my freebies house and unlock the rooms you choose. nickyraby.com/freebies house. I also have workshops, programs, and one-on-one bespoke offerings. For prices and availability, go to nickyraby.com. Thank you, as always, for spending some time with me and my guests. Now, on to today's episode. Interviews are back after a little short break. I am so chuffed to be talking to people again, and I've got so many brilliant interviewees up my sleeve. I can't wait to share them. Kicking us off is Catherine Erdley, who is the founder of Future Retail Consulting, dedicated to helping you and your product business flow. Because as product businesses grow, they get more complicated and many founders get overwhelmed trying to keep up. So Catherine uses a 4-part process based on her industry experience that helps them get more organized and make more money. Sounds great, hey? So in my chat today, we'll be talking about all things business and how you can create these systems, how you can actually make progress and accelerate your brand in a non-risky way. If you like this episode, please tag me on social media. Let me know where you're listening. I get some very interesting photos of baths being run or walks. I absolutely love to see them. And also let me know what you've taken away from this episode or what action you're going to take. That's enough from me. Thank you so much for listening as always, and I will see you next time. Enjoy the episode. Catherine, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me what you do. Tell me, what's your job title? Where are you up to in this wonderful creative lives that we have?
So my job title is retail consultant, and I work with founders of product businesses. They pretty much are all creative product businesses, and by that I mean they're selling beautiful products as opposed to, widgets.
Yes.
And increasingly, actually, I'm working with a lot of ethical product businesses as well. So it's sort of a niche within a niche, I guess.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things, everybody feels like they've got an idea for a book, or they could create something, or they could run a cafe, but actually knowing how to get that idea into the world and market it and sell it and actually make it profitable is a whole different ball game for sure.
Absolutely. And that is a common theme I see as well, is that people start product businesses because they have a real passion for something, whether it's that they wanted to buy something that they couldn't find, or whether they had a real passion for curating or creating beautiful products. And they have the vision, they or often have great skills at marketing and all the rest of it. But it's also product businesses themselves are very complicated.
Yes.
And it is, and often I work with people who've got to a certain extent and got stuck, or actually, interestingly, that have grown to a certain level, and these people think that becoming successful or getting top line sales is perhaps the hard part, but then actually sometimes then you get to that point and you realise, hang on a minute, I still need that support because it's brought up a whole host of other complications I couldn't have foreseen.
Totally. And I think those are the hidden layers of the onion of that business, is that you only know what you know when you're in that moment. And then suddenly it's like you're
Well, when you're doing your tax return or things, and then you feel like you've been doing it for about 48 hours, and then you're still like, what, 14%? No, why? So how did it start? How did you get into all of this?
Well, I've been in the retail business since I graduated. I went to Warwick Business School, so my degree's in international business. I'd known from quite sort of late teenage years, I decided that I really liked the idea of business. I'm not sure at that point I really necessarily knew what exactly that meant.
I've seen the outfits in Vogue, and that is what I'm going to be wearing.
In fact, I remember one of my very good friends at university was also doing a business course, and I said to her, why did you want to come and do business? And she went, well, that film Working Girl.
Oh, yes.
She said I thought it looked fun. So
yes, I thought I wanted to be a copper at some stage, and my dad was like, really? I was like, yes, I really like Crime Watch, and he's like, A, why are you watching that? And B, it's not a career choice to make a decision on based on you liking a telly programme.
But when I graduated, I didn't really know. I'd applied to some of those sort of, milk round type big recruitment drives where you're one of sort of 15,000 students across the UK trying to get into sort of KPMG or something like that, and I didn't get particularly far with that, and I wasn't 100% sure that's what I wanted to do. And then one day after I graduated, I was reading something on the internet, and this was back in 2000, so it was sort of the dawn of the
It was a slow process.
Yeah. And it said that I'd always worked retail. I'd always worked, my summer jobs and everything. Had been in shops, and I really enjoyed the shop floor. But I knew I didn't want to go into the shop floor full time. I couldn't really see myself as sort of store management, that kind of thing, because I knew it's very physically demanding. I mean, I have a huge amount of respect for those people who are on their feet all day. And I knew
that a lot of terrible fluorescent lights which just give you that weird migraine and
And they all seem to go for, 7 hours without lunch breaks and things, because they're just so busy.
Totally.
So I knew that wasn't really what I wanted to do. And then I'd read something and it said that merchandising, which is where I started my career, it said it's something strategic, it's very numerate, but you have to work with the product as well. So you have to, get comfortable with products, but you're sort of steering the strategy. And as soon as it was a funny thing, as soon as I read it, I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I want to do. And I found an agency that specialised in merchandising roles, and I'd never even heard of it before. I'd no idea what it was. And within about a week, I'd got a job at Laura Ashley, so that was my first job. And those, your first job in merchandising is very much admin, so you're sending all of the stock out to the stores. But I remember just being completely blown away by, wow, it's just so much work goes on.
It's a machine. It's a floral machine.
Yeah. And I just remember walking around supermarkets thinking, hang on a minute, how do these guys do it? Because there's just so much. And merchandising, it was a great career. I really enjoyed it. I went to the States for 5 years. My husband's American, so I went and worked out there for a multi-billion-dollar company, so a whole different scale.
Yeah.
Came back to the UK, came back to London, and worked for mostly high street. So I worked for the Austin Reed Group. I worked for Coast, and my job that I had when I left corporate life was Paper Chase, which was, so all really, all businesses where they were really passionate about the product. I mean, Coast was beautiful dresses, and, Paper Chase totally, my big dream. I'm a massive stationery addict.
Oh,
so
I could spend an afternoon in there. It's just
totally
like, a notebook for this. I didn't realise that I needed to put my all-time favourite recipes in here. But yes, I'm buying it. Yes. I hear you.
Absolutely. And I really loved it. And I loved the fact that merchandising, I did have to work with the buying team and the design team. So the creative teams, I worked with them. So they would have the product ideas, and then the merchandising team very much hold the purse strings, as it were. So they would say, we think we need to have this product, that product. And merchandising would say, okay, we'll buy this many of them, bring them in at this time, sell them for this price. So we were very much the kind of effectively making sure that the creative ideas made money. So yeah, I loved what I was doing. I loved all of the different elements. Loved my team. So I had sort of over the years managing larger and larger teams, which I really loved, all the mentoring aspect and developing people and teaching them how to manage people and all the rest of it. So I really enjoyed all of that. But it just got to the point where summer of 2017, I'd been a full-time working mum for a decade by this point, as my son was 10 and my daughter was 7, and it just got to the point where my husband also works full-time, I was working full-time, I was pretty much always running somewhere, whether it was to school, to do drop-off, or
I always check in when I'm using that voice of "come on," like I know that I haven't got the balance right. Like I remember a couple of weeks ago we had to run for a train in Manchester, and like I'm dragging my child, and Matt's running with the buggy, and I was like, "What? Who is this family? This is awful." And my child still does impressions of me going, "Come on!" But we made the train. But I guess where, from a mindset point of view, where did you kind of get that permission? How could you give yourself permission to sort of actually make the leap and kind of try a different way rather than, because I guess on paper sometimes we all do these things like, well, you know, it makes sense and I'm lucky to do this, and we can kind of really easily talk ourselves or back ourselves into a corner of doing it. How did you make those moves?
It was tough. It was a really tough decision, and it was one of those things that's really funny. You know, when you say like, "Oh, I don't know what to do. I feel so conflicted," and usually the truth is, you know exactly what you want to do and exactly what you need to do, but you're just not ready to face up to it yet.
Right. You can't say it out loud. Yeah.
You can't say it out loud. So I kept saying, "I don't know what to do," and I was just really. I think it just basically got to the point where I was at breaking point. You know, I was very stressed. Yeah. Work, as much as I loved many of the elements, was really, really demanding. And my daughter had very minor medical problems. I mean, she had fluid, she couldn't hear anything, she had to have grommets, but it was enough. So it wasn't exactly a major issue, but it was enough that just then the added burden of those sort of appointments and
they don't run on time, or they're not predictable, or those moments of like, can you come now? And you're like, sure, if I don't come now, it's going to be another 8 months. So yes, I'm coming, and it's fine, but yeah, I totally hear you that it only takes one sort of piece of the cog to sort of to kind of skip off, then it just makes it really difficult to manage and handle.
Absolutely. And I was just absolutely miserable. And I just remember sitting with a friend in Pret, and I was, you know, I think in tears, and she was just like, "You have to quit your job." And I was like, "I can't. I literally cannot." And then it was just like, I don't know, a little bit of a light bulb moment. My husband and I sat down, and I'd all the way along said, you know, I can't possibly do that. And then we just sat down and went, well, actually, could I? And it was just the weirdest thing. But the thing, it was this feeling of being like clinging onto a wall with my fingernails, you know, and at some point I just thinking, well, I could actually just let go.
Yes.
And it was terrifying. And I remember talking to my best friend about this and just saying, you know, I guess then I just can't. What I've discovered is I can't actually do it all. And I remember her saying to me, it was such a supportive thing to say. She said, "Well, that's not true, because you have been doing it all and you've been doing it really well. You've just decided you don't want to anymore." And I was like, yeah, okay.
That's it. I'm a lady of leisure now. I'm not doing anything. Children, you can make your own dinner.
So it was a really empowering thing to think, yeah, well, actually, okay, maybe it is about me having more balance, and but it was a long, hard thing to come to terms with. And when I gave my notice, I thought I'd have this sort of huge feeling of relief come over me, but actually I was terrified.
Of course, because then you open up that whole new can of worms of all the things that you're going to learn. And I think sometimes when I do my one-on-one sessions with people, they're really revved up and like, yeah, oh my goodness, I could actually, you know, after we've sort of thrashed things through, there's that point of like, oh my goodness, I can actually do this. And then they almost have that kind of shadow over their face of going, oh God, now I'm actually going to have to do this. This is real now. And I've actually spent the time trying to figure out how to do this thing. And that can be really scary to go live or press publish. Or like I remember the first couple of blog post I ever wrote. Like I couldn't actually, I had to kind of find, press enter on my computer, but then look the other way because it was too much to bear. It's sort of, too big. So I guess what were the steps that you took that helped you to ease into this and start your own gig and creating your own rules?
Well, I think I started thinking pretty much straight away because I knew, and one of the reasons we'd always said that I couldn't quit my job was because my husband always used to joke. He'd say, like, you do it on a Friday and by Monday you'll be like, I'm bored, what's next?
And then I always get to that point where I start interfering with other people and it's like, oh no, you need to get busier, you've got too much time on your hands.
So I knew I didn't want to just stop dead. I knew I wanted to do something. So I did do a lot of brainstorming. I talked to a lot of people. I attended some sort of seminars on starting your own thing. I just think I just did I guess I just started toying around with the idea. And the funny thing was that I actually knew pretty much, my first instinct was, well, what could I do? And my first instinct was, well, actually I could help other people. And I specifically thought I want to help women who want to create flexibility in their own lives and have their own business, and I want to help them do that successfully. And I pretty much knew right off the top of my head that's what I wanted to do, and to take some of the skills that I'd learned from the big retailers and help them in their business, because you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are processes, there are tools that all retailers use, that if you're somebody who loves skincare and has started a skincare brand after being an accountant for 15 years, which happens a lot. I meet those kind of people a lot. Then you don't know what those tools are, but I do. So I pretty much knew right away what I wanted to do. But then, ironically, I did do some work with somebody who kind of spun me off in the wrong direction, because he was just a bit like, well, no one's ever going to pay you for that. Well,
that's always nice when you get that supportive, but no.
Yes. And then sort of said, no, you need to think about working with bigger retailers as a consultant that way. And I was like,
I don't want to.
Yeah, I don't want to. And it's funny, because that actually sort of, because you feel very vulnerable, and because you feel, I remember, I was given a free business coach by sort of Enterprise for London, I think it's called. So it was, he wasn't exactly a business coach. He was the kind of guy you could go to and say, should I be a sole trader or a limited company, like that kind of guy. And I remember the first meeting I had with him, I literally, he said to me, what do you want to do? And I almost couldn't say the words. Like I was like, I want to help people with their businesses. And
what do you want to do?
It just seems you feel so vulnerable. So I think I was kind of vulnerable at that point to somebody saying to me, actually, I don't know if that's going to be a good idea, because I didn't have the strength of my own conviction at that point. So I got spun off in a bit of a wrong direction for a while on trying to look at ways I could work with bigger retailers before after I'd actually left my job and had a bit of mental space, I was like, no, I know what I want to do.
Yeah, you're so right. And I think knowing where you take, maybe it's about like you get to a certain point in your career or age of like really thinking about what you're available for and what you're not available for. Like whose feedback where do you need to open this up to? And I said on the podcast previously, I'm pregnant with our second child, and I'm really approaching it in a different way, as in I'm not available for the well-meaning friends and families, random strangers in the street advising me on what I should be doing with my child, because it's that point where you just go, I'm not going to do that. But I think you're so right. Sometimes you want to share, and people always encourage you to get yourself out there and hear the feedback. But sometimes people don't, I know this sounds very dippy hippie, but sometimes people don't say it with love. It's too much from their own agenda or what went wrong or what didn't go right with them, that they're sort of blinded by that. They're led from that place.
Yeah, and also if their values just aren't the same as yours. I just think this particular person just didn't get what I wanted to do, and it was almost like, no, you need to think about this from the financial what's going to make the most sense financially. And I was kind of like, well, if I wanted the financial reward, I'd have stayed in my full-time job, you know.
Yeah.
What I really wanted more than anything was that ability to drop the kids at school, do what I needed to do during the day, pick them up afterwards, and if one of them was ill and needed to stay home for the day, that they could sleep on the sofa or something. You know, I didn't have to have that, you know, the thing that my husband and I used to do, like well, what have you got on? Well, what have you got on? Well, could you...
Rock, paper, scissors, it?
Yeah, exactly. Who's going to have the most hassle at taking time off at this time, you know?
And there's nothing like having a good old row where you've got a sick child kind of like, Mummy, this is awful. What other elements have really helped you to kind of get the wheels in motion and get your messaging out there? I think this is really key for so many people, that using that empowering language of like, I'm actually doing this. This is a real life thing. And sometimes when I meet people at networking events, they'll sort of, they're there maybe they're not sure why they're there. This is the thing. It's like, oh, people have told me I should go and network. I'm just going to go and see what happens. And I totally understand that. I've done it myself. But sometimes there is a apologetic stance of like, I'm not really sure what this is, or I've kind of got this idea, but I haven't done anything with it yet. And because I am who I am, not in any kind of great expert status, but because I'm a genuinely curious person, I'm like, no, actually tell me, what is this business? It sounds great. Or, you know, I want to get to know what they're doing. How did you make those shifts in yourself to step up to the mark?
I think, there's a phrase that I love that says, if you're willing to experience fear, disappointment and embarrassment, you become an almost unstoppable force of nature. And I love that phrase because it just, basically, I just decided that whether or not I was scared about something wasn't really an indicator that whether or not I should do it. And in fact, I should just do things. And, you know, and when I felt nervous, or I remember the first time I wrote a blog post, I made about 3 people proofread it, which is hilarious because probably about 4 people read it in total.
Yes.
You know, but
they were like, I love the way you put that apostrophe there. It was amazing.
So but I needed that support then. And then once I'd done it, I just had that confidence. So I just realised that if I just did things, at some point, I don't know how or I don't know why, but at some point I just stopped caring whether or not, because at the beginning there was a lot of stuff about, well, what if people think, who does she think she is?
Yes.
What if people I used to work with read this? Like, what if somebody reads it and laughs? And I just decided at some point, I just don't care. And also saw it more from a point of service, I think helped too. It was a bit, you know, somebody said, you know, getting your message out there, think about the people who need to hear it. So I tried to think about it more from that service point of view. Okay, there are maybe people who need to hear this message because they're struggling with their business.
Yeah.
In terms of how I actually stepped up to the mark, I think the one thing I'd say has been hugely encouraging and wonderful has been the amount of support that I've had from other female entrepreneurs in particular.
They are all there. They're all ready to play. You don't ever have to sort of feel alone, really. You just have to find the right ones who are going to be, you know, your flavour and what you're all about.
Absolutely. And the first people I worked with, so one of the first things I did was some basically free consultancy to see if the skills that I had were useful. And again, the places that they came from were certain Facebook groups that when I was on Facebook, there were certain groups for women entrepreneurs or for women in general that was very supportive. And I could put something out there and say, I'm looking for some people who'd like to work with me for free so I can kind of hone my offering. And I got such a great response from there. And that really encouraged me to keep going because people really responded to what I was doing, and I realised what I could. I started to get my head around what I could offer a small business, because it is, when I first started out, my biggest problem was that everything I wrote sounded like a corporate email. My website read like a corporate email. I was using terms that nobody understood. I was using phrases that meant something to me but didn't mean anything to anybody else. So I really had to try and immerse myself as much as possible into the mindset of other entrepreneurs and what their needs were, and really that community and the support that I got from other women has been huge with that.
And I think sometimes we still have those old beliefs like, oh, we better not tell anybody just in case somebody nicks our idea, or we sort of sometimes want to keep things secretive. But at the end of the day, there are most likely, unless you have indeed reinvented the wheel, it is likely that there are other people out there who are doing something similar. But if you can really focus on what your niche is and how your flavour is different to other people's, that's like such a great use of your time, because people will resonate with you. And I think when I started this podcast, it was this sense of going, yeah, but is there room for another sort of moment? And it was that thing of absolutely, because I'm missing something, so I'm looking for something, so why don't I create it, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think actually, funnily enough, the people that I've probably got the most support from have been some of the other people in my niche. So I work with two other people on workshops and various different things for product businesses because we have complementary skills. And I'm part of Sam Burgess's Small and Mighty Co, her business blog, and that's all people who work with product businesses. So actually, where I've reached out and collaborated with people who are in the similar niche to me, I mean, not necessarily directly competing, I found that actually that's been a real source of strength and support, as opposed to, I could have said, oh, well, I don't want to, well, what if I talk to them and they, like, as you say, they take my ideas, but actually together we're stronger, and collaborate. Most people are much more interested in collaborating than they are in competing. And, I have people who pass clients on to me if they don't think that they're suited to the work with them. And I do the same if I come across someone who says, oh, actually, what I really, really need help with more than anything is, my Instagram messaging. Well, that's not me. So, but I know some great people who can help you. So
totally. And I just think I've sort of thrown the typical female entrepreneur assumptions or perceptions out of the window, and I just go, how do I want to show up? Like, what's important to me? What are my values? And I always hope that when people meet me in real life, whether that's in the pub at a birthday party or at a networking event, that they would I'm still going to be the same person who will open a door for somebody, or help them with their buggy down the stairs, or, not just be like, sorry, I'm in work mode now. This is because that's not how life and business work anymore, especially with these products. And I'm sure you'll find them as well, as people are so driven to share their stories as well, of sort of why they've created this thing, why it's important to them, especially if something is ethical or sustainable. There's usually a real passion and a real drive behind it. Absolutely,
absolutely. And one of my brand values is genuine, because I felt like if you're a small business owner, you get inundated with these 24 hours to build your 7-figure business, or all of this nonsense, and it's not the way it works. I wanted to be genuine, I wanted to be honest. I recently ran a product business startup cost survey because I wanted to give people genuine information about how much it costs to start a business, and because it's really hard when you first start out, and you just want people to be genuine and upfront and honest with you and say, it's very unlikely you're going to be pulling a salary from your product business in your first year. But if you know that, and you can kick it off while you're still doing another full-time job, or, kind of plan accordingly. I'm a big believer that if you can do anything if you create a plan for it.
Oh, you really can. And I find that when I'm in that sort of sink or swim, and I'm in the sink moment, I'm not feeling creative. I'm not pushing myself out of my comfort zone. I'm wanting to sit under a duvet and watch Grand Designs and forget about everything. I'm not I don't thrive. And I think that's about getting to know yourself as well. I don't thrive in that, oh my goodness, I've got to make this work in 17 hours. The countdown is on. I'm much better because if you think about it as like doing a stretch or something, if you're tensing everything and forcing it and go, oh my goodness, I've got to do everything perfectly today. Whereas if you can kind of play around with it a little bit, you find different flows, you find different ways of kind of doing it. What would you say are your top tips that people should know before embarking into the world of launching a product? What should people know about that would probably be the most obvious thing to you in the world, but people may not even think about?
I think that the most obvious thing, which is going to sound really obvious, but it's all about the product.
Yes.
So in other words, people worry about their marketing, which obviously is a key part of it, but the best products in the world will sell through word of mouth or they'll get great press coverage because they're unique and they're different. And I think a lot of people start thinking, right, I want to do a product business. Okay, what's my marketing plan? But the best marketing in the world is to have an amazing product.
Yes.
So to have something unique, to have something different, to have a special niche for it. And, so if that's that you want to make silver jewelry, and, there are thousands and thousands of silver jewelry companies out there, but if you can find what is your niche, so is it something that's I worked with a brand it was all about the sea, so every piece was a sea motif, or so there was so it worked really well in coastal towns and all the rest of it. So it's really knowing your niche and being, before you get too far with it, what can you do to make that product the most amazing product it can be.
Yes.
And that in itself, all the time that you spend developing it, doing prototypes, doing your research, doing your customer, interviewing your customers, being so clear about who your customer is and so clear about your values and what you're trying to bring for them, or what problem you're trying to solve for them, and just all of that testing and feedback and all of that work up front. People get impatient because they think, I just want to get launched, but actually if it's like sort of lighting a touch paper, it's got to be, in order to really succeed, it's having an amazing product and having something a bit different as well, and being able to stand out.
And being willing, I guess, not to do all the sexy stuff like the branding or the Instagram or the kind of the flashy events. Sort of, I've just done a session with a coaching client. She was talking about launching a podcast, and I was saying, if you can do that behind the scenes stuff of like, what are you creating? What is what do you want to do with your listeners? Not in a kind of weird, creepy way, but like, how do you want them to feel? What are they doing at the same time as listening to your podcast? Then it will help you make those decisions later down the line of it's a yes or it's a no. And being able to know if something is on brand or off brand, and sort of understanding those sort of moments. What are the patterns that you see all the time that you're kind of trying not to judge, and you're standing on the sidelines and kind of going, oh no, don't do that, please, no. What are those things?
Sometimes it's overcommitment. So sometimes people will say, I have talked to people who sort of go, right, well, I've got created this range, now I've just got to work out who I'm selling it to. And it's sort of like,
Or when people say, I'm selling it to mums, and you're like, who's mum? Who is this person?
Yeah, well, people get nervous about making it too specific because they think they're going to be they're going to be excluding other people around them. But really, I think that I like to think of it as that when you're trying to light a fire, you don't just get a massive pile of wood and try and hold a match to it. You won't get very far.
You start with it.
Exactly. You start with something really small and you light that, and then you add to it, and that's kind of how your customer persona should work. So yes, okay, you could. People say, well, mums, that's a nice broad market, but then it's the same thing. You're not really talking to anybody. But if you say, actually, I'm targeting mums in their early 30s who are really style conscious, who are really want to maintain their identity after they've had their child, and they've got a big passion for interiors. So I want to create things that are useful for them and practical, but they are going to be feel good about having them in their house, not, like got Thomas the Tank Engine all over them or something like that. Then you've got a persona, and okay, so that's a much smaller subset. But then around that, you're pulling the people who maybe don't exactly fit into that, but actually just really like the look of it, or So I think probably not being specific enough about who their customer is one of the big ones, and definitely the overcommitting. So sort of going down the line and saying, oh well, I'm going to manufacture 2,000 of those to get the better cost price, and this is before you've launched. So you sort of say, well, then that's okay. So you might get a better price per item, but you've also just used up your entire first year budget on your stock, and you don't know yet that you've got a community and a customer for this. And so it's always about test and learn. And even if you have to have the first few products handmade instead of manufactured, just to learn about them and then start expanding, that's a much better way to go, and not to overcommit yourself financially right from the get-go.
And I think that's just that sense of being open to that feedback and open to that lack of perfection. And I know I've done that when I first started launching courses. I kind of, once I gave myself permission, going, oh, actually, if somebody doesn't resonate with this, or if this doesn't work, or if I need to completely remodel this and restructure this in a year, I'm going to do that because I'll know those sorts of things. Whereas I think sometimes people invest in having the big jazzy website and spending several grand, and it's like you don't know what this is yet. And thank goodness I didn't stick with my original website, is all I'm gonna say.
And also, you don't know how your customer is going to react. You don't necessarily know if they're going to react the way you expect. You may end up having a slightly different customer. You may well want to pivot. And if you've backed yourself into a corner financially, overcommitted, then you can't pivot. And so I think it's really important to just bear that in mind and not to jump in. And it is difficult. Branding something that, if you're going for a luxury product, then it's very hard to do that without really great branding right from the get-go. But otherwise, if you can get away with the sort of not cheap branding, but the basics of branding to get you started, rather than investing the thousands and thousands in a much larger program, then again, it's all about giving yourself time to pivot. And you're actually much better off spending the money going overseas to meet the factory that's going to be making your products and building a relationship with them than you are, for example, to do a big flashy press launch because you think that's what you're going to need. But it goes back to, as you said, the sort of deeply unsexy stuff is often what you need to get going.
Totally. And even that sense, even from a year ago, you would get those big, if you did a beauty online order, or even going into a shop, it's like the Rowan Atkinson thing in Love Actually, where he puts a ribbon on and then he puts the thing in. And even in the last sort of few months, there is such a chat about being eco-friendly and sustainable and lack of packaging, lack of plastic. And you just think, gosh, if you bought all of that stuff, it might have you might not have even thought about that in terms of your business, but it might have a really sort of detrimental thing. Because I was reading about a couple of beauty bloggers the other day, and they were saying, they just report back saying, why did you send me that big thing? And, it puts them off from working with the brand. I've just got a couple more questions, which is, what helps you sort of set yourself up for the day when you're looking after kids, you're kind of running a busy life, you're trying to have a moment of peace and quiet for yourself to get your head in the game, and also you're serving other people? What helps you to sort of get grounded or focused, or just feeling like you're not in that kind of constantly running state?
I think the big thing for me is I try and get up reasonably early, not super early, not one of the 5 a.m. gang, I'm afraid, but just time just to do a little bit of journaling in the morning. I like to write a gratitude list. I find that really key to helping whenever I feel sort of stressed or overwhelmed. I write down 10 things that I'm grateful for. So a bit of time in the morning for that, and then spending time with my husband before he goes to work. And then usually now the kids are a little bit older, before I get breakfast for them, they're doing their own thing for a little bit in the morning. Then I usually get like another 15-20 minutes to myself, which is really nice, which when I'm in the right mind frame, then I'll do a little bit of yoga. Otherwise, I end up checking my Instagram.
Yeah, or just staring gormlessly into space is what I am. And then, whoa, okay, come on, guys, we've got to go. Let's go. There's the voice again. Like, come on.
But we've got enough time now. We live very close to the school, which is great, and we have a timer that goes off like way earlier than it really needs to, just so we can have that very relaxed, get ready for school, and I don't have to chivvy them along anymore, and that's really nice. So that sets me up in a nice mindset, and I actually really like the school runs. You get to see everyone and say hi, and still, it's nice that even a year or so after I left my job, I'm still actually really genuinely grateful for doing it every day, because just means that I've spent so many years tearing out the house at 7 a.m, and that it's just still really, really nice for it to be that little bit later. So then I find that just means that I come back and I'm in the right mind frame, whether or not I'm heading into town to meet with a client or whether I'm having a day at home. I'm just in that mindset, and I just don't feel so rushed. In fact, we had so much time in the mornings that the other day we went to school, realised it was Red Nose Day, had time to come back and get the red noses and go back in.
Brilliant. Had time to write the curriculum, go straight back and teach it.
Yeah.
And I've got one final question, which is, where would you like to be in 5 years' time? Do you think that far ahead? Do you have any ideas? Like, what would you like to do in business, personally? Do you have a bit of a goal list for that?
I think in 5 years' time, I would like to. I think in a lot of ways I'm happy with where I am. So I'd say in 5 years' time, I'd like to do some more work on my courses and online element of what I do. So that is definitely something that's in the pipeline. So I'd like to develop that more, but to really just, as I am now, working with really interesting clients who are doing really amazing things with their beautiful products, and have spent some time building up reputation as an industry expert. And my mentor asked me, what would you like to be famous for? And I was just really had to think about it. And then I was like, actually, I really like the idea of being famous for helping the retailers of the future, because I think that's what's so exciting about right now, is that although there's so much talk in the news about the retail industry, it's actually a really exciting time. I think it's a real crossover time. I think we're seeing some big names, a lot more shaky than you could have ever imagined, but what you're going to get instead of these really exciting purpose-led brands that are speaking to conscious consumers, that have communities around them, and that are doing just really interesting, lovely things with the product. So I think I feel very confident. I feel very optimistic about it.
Oh, and Victoria, I mean, I'm probably going to hash up this quote, but Victoria Wood always used to say this thing in her stand-up when she knew it was spring, because there were suddenly rows and rows of lavender and lemon cardigans all across the high street. And it's yeah, that's so true. We don't just need those. We don't want those pointers. We want to be surprised by our experience. We want to think about things in a different kind of way. And we just sort of, I think a lot of us have become slightly bored toddlers. No, yes. Entertain me, do something different, make me buy. And it's good because it pushes people, and you really notice who's going to stay the course, who's going to be sort of available for that. Where can people find you if they want to come and chat or ask you a question or work with you?
Well, I have a wonderful Facebook group called Female Founders in Retail. We have 600 women who are all building their own product businesses. It's an amazing place to come and ask questions and ask about label suppliers or all kinds of questions that people get asked. So, come and join me in the Facebook group, or you can find me at futureretail.world, my website, and you can learn all about working with me one-to-one, or find me on Instagram, Future Retail UK. So I'm all over the place.
Amazing. And that's another lesson as well. You have to be, because sometimes you don't know where people are going to find you or what they need, or any of that sort of stuff. So, that is brilliant. And of course, I'll add everything to the show notes as well. But wonderful. I have learned so much today, and I do actually have an idea for a product. And
Okay.
stupidly in my head, I was like, yeah, I'll just do that before I have this child. I'm like, I'm not doing it before I have this child. I am having the child. I'm thinking about it. And then talking to you, Catherine, and taking it from there. But yeah, I think that's another great point of like, you don't have to rush everything. You don't have to have it all shipped and done. Like, take your time, friends. We've all got... Sometimes, there's all this pressure. I wrote an Instagram post about it the other day of, having everything figured out by the time you were 19. Well, when I was 19, I was hanging around with some very undesirable boys, like spending a lot of time in bus stations. And it's like, no, I was not my best self. So we've all got plenty more to give. But thank you so much for being such a brilliant guest. I've loved chatting. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really fun.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you haven't already, feel free to rate, review, and subscribe for all the brand new episodes. If you want to go deeper with my support, check out my freebies house and unlock the rooms you choose. nickyraby.com/freebies house. I also have workshops, programs, and one-on-one bespoke offerings. For prices, availability, or just to have a chat with me, go to nickyraby.com. Thank you, as always, for spending some time with me and my guests, and I'll see you next time.